up and try and spin you out a little bit. So I would say it's probably best to be home at this point in time.
Yeah, it. I was trying to put salt down out there, but the wind just kept blowing, and it didn't seem to be doing much good on the sidewalks.
Yeah, it was about 8 degrees when I got into the studio this morning, and I don't think it's going to go up from here.
Okay. Well, everyone be safe, and for those working outside, like Gina and I were talking about, bundle up, be safe, and appreciate all the hard work of those keeping our utilities going, our livestock going, our roads going. Lots of people out working on those roads. So give us an update, a wrap up of 2022 for Big River Resources as well as the ethanol industry in general.
Yeah, so 2022 was what I would call a very good, strong year for Big River Resources. First and foremost, everyone was safe through the year. All of our employees and staff came through and just performed wonderfully through the year. From a profitability standpoint, going to be one of our better years. So we're very, very pleased about that. Other than that, I would say all in all for the shareholders, the staff, everyone has just been 100% successful. And as you know, this year was a little bit of a transition year for us with some new senior managers, myself and Jordan Rettman coming into place at the beginning of the year. Now, Deb Green had been in place for a year before that, but we do have a relatively new management team in place, so it was a transition year for us, and that all went well. Obviously, our board of directors has been around for a while, so definitely some continuity with that crew, and they were wonderful to work with this year and help us through the transition. So we're ready for the next year. We're ready to see what unfolds and look for those opportunities.
You've had a chance to do a lot of end of the year wrap up meetings with renewable fuels organizations. Tell us what's on the horizon. What policy are they looking at for the new year?
Well, there's several key regulatory and legislative actions out there. And first, let me say, RFA growth, all of our corn growers, all of our advocacy groups have really done a wonderful job in the past year. I feel like we've, for the first time, had some legislative and regulatory wins in the ethanol industry. So we're really excited about that. I think the one that's really top of mind right now and is on the front burner would be the bill that's been introduced into the Senate and the House. I believe the Senate was Debbie Fisher from Nebraska. Angie Craig was on the House bill. It's a Retailer Choice Act, and what it essentially does is it gives us that year-round E15 that the industry has been fighting for the better part of 10 years. So now I'm hearing that it may struggle in the 117th Congress to get passed. I do believe it is a bipartisan bill, so I do believe in the 2018 Congress we're going to have good support for it. It's critical for the ethanol industry for us to continue to increase our inclusion rates in that gas tank. So
during our last Ag Roundtable, yes, you alluded to some of the different legislation that's out there that's necessary now, because despite what you hear in the news or on social media, is you would think EV is taking over now, but the truth of the matter is we're still at 95% liquid fuel vehicles.
Yeah, 100%, Vanessa. I think we're going to see that inclusion, that penetration of EVs creep up. But if you look at, on the legislative front, the Inflation Reduction Act, that bill is actually more of a climate bill at its core. And what it's doing is it's incentivizing all of us to produce a low carbon fuel. Electricity is included in that bill as well. So that's really the driver going forward and I'm sure we'll talk about goals here later, but one of ours longer term goals is to make sure that we produce a low carbon fuel feedstock.
And we are certainly talking about that with a combustible engine that it can produce low carbon, clean burning fuel, and that is again using ethanol.
Yes, ethanol, and that's a message that we try and get out, and I think a lot of our associations are doing a very good job. This is a low carbon fuel. It's the CO2 is biogenic, meaning that it's a circular CO2, and ultimately when we complete our carbon sequestration initiative that we've got going on right now, we will be a negative CO2 net introducer into the environment. So I know there's a lot of discussion out there about the carbon pipelines, and these are obviously things that we're very interested in order to maintain our stance in this market. When you think about Big River, you think about the farmer first and foremost. Founded by farmers, the majority of the shareholders are producers. So what drives us ultimately is in the best interest of the farmer.
And you talked about carbon sequestration, and we touched on it back at the roundtable in September, that you'll have the ability to have a negative carbon, because that's going to be judged now, or there's a formula, there's a scoreboard now that keeps track of how much carbon entities produce. Describe how the carbon sequestration will work for Big River Resources.
Yes, absolutely. Everyone is indexed on their carbon score at this point. And I referenced the Inflation Reduction Act. Embedded in that is really, to put it simplistically, a national clean fuel standard. And that national clean fuel standard embedded within will judge all fuels, and specifically ethanol, on its carbon score. The sequestration of that biogenic carbon from our facilities, it's a very clean source of CO2, and the sequestration is the single largest thing that we can implement to lower our carbon score. If we have, just for reference, say a 55 CI carbon score, that will take us down the carbon sequestration by 25 to 30 points. So it's a very, very sizable portion.
Is this something that we were working on in the industry well before this act came into play?
Absolutely, absolutely. There was a tax credit that did incentivize this. Now, the tax credits and some of the provisions within the Inflation Reduction Act offer further incentive. So I think you're going to see the sequestration of carbon not only in the ethanol industry, but utilities, power generators. It's going to be a lot more common than we see today.
Okay. We're talking with David Zimmerman, Big River Resources CEO and president. So a lot of good news there. Remind folks again how ethanol, because now that ethanol is being talked about in a larger scale of an audience, meaning a lot of it was staying inside the agriculture realm, our farmers and the industries, the ag industry. Now consumers are hearing more about ethanol, which is what we've been pushing for a long time. But the ability to have this low carbon, clean burning fuel is starting to gain some traction with non-farmers, with our everyday consumer.
Yeah, absolutely it is, especially in urban areas and obviously in rural areas too. You see a consumer that is sensitive, in some instances, sensitive to their environmental impact, and that's where ethanol comes in. We're very confident in our environmental profile, and when you pull up to the pump and you see 88 octane that you can buy cheaper than any fuel at that island, it's really a no-brainer to a certain degree. It's better for the environment. It supports the ag community. It's produced nationally, so the national defense or the energy security is a huge portion of that I think probably doesn't get discussed enough.
Okay. Do you talk with folks in the oil industry? Do you hear much from them? Are they making any changes in that industry for the carbon sequestration as well?
What we're seeing out of the oil industry right now is definitely a drive to lower their carbon footprint as well. The way that's being manifested most often, or in the greatest degree, is we're seeing them venture into renewable diesel fuel. So a lot of the old refining facilities, especially out west, that have been mothballed, are being retrofitted to produce renewable diesel. Most recently, you saw Chevron that purchased Renewable Energy Group, which is one of the largest biodiesel producer in the United States. Chevron has, like I said, has purchased that, and it's now called CREG. But that's a pretty good indicator of what the oil industry is thinking.
That is very interesting, David, because they have the money to be able to purchase into the industry and merge with the industry or become a part of the industry, given that they've had a significant amount of revenue for a long, long time.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. And I know they're driven by the same things that we are. Public policy, national policy is pushing us all in this direction. And that's, as we look forward for Big River, that's, we had a transitional year here in leadership, but we're also seeing a larger transition within the ethanol and liquid fuels industry, one that is driving us towards this low carbon future. And we very much want to protect what the folks that came before me worked to build. And that's some really vibrant corn markets in this area, some strong corn prices. And with the ethanol industry consuming about 40% of the U.S. corn supply, it's critical. The rules of the game are laid out, and we intend to play by those rules and protect this corn market.
Yes, and there's plenty of corn for food, fiber, and fuel.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's well stated, but when you take that corn kernel and you break it down by component, the starch goes to where it should, which is the fuel. The protein is separated out and put into a high protein DDG feed supply that gets fed locally and exported. So it's really the most efficient use of that kernel of corn.
Okay. All right, let's transition into other markets, global perspective. How is ethanol viewed by other countries, and specifically with China, who has been a partner who has been very important to our ag industry?
Well, you have two different world perspectives when it comes to ethanol and trade in general. Now, when you look at China and some others, there are those countries that buy ethanol based on its price versus gasoline. So if ethanol is cheaper, they will buy and they will blend and they will use it. On the world scale, if gasoline gets cheaper, they are quick to switch back and go that route. Now, there's other countries like the Canadians, for example, who are putting a clean fuel standard of their own into place. So they are offering incentives based on our carbon scores, again, to send fuel to Canada. So Canada is one of our strongest buyers and consistent buyers. So when you compare that to China or some others, there's definitely a different view on how and when to utilize ethanol.
And interestingly, with China, are they taking part in any active steps to reduce challenges that could be coming from their atmosphere for climate?
Well, they say the right things, but their actions oftentimes are different. They had talked about having a 5 to 10% ethanol inclusion rate into their fuel system in the past years. We really haven't seen, at least, we haven't seen major steps in that direction.
Okay. How about DDGs? They were a consumer of our DDG products.
They've been intermittent buyers of DDGs, still not very consistent when it comes to DDGs. We do have a strong, it's about a 1 million metric ton a month export market, but a majority of that will go to Turkey and Vietnam and some other Asian destinations.
Okay. And 2023, what's on the horizon for Big River Resources? A lot of policy and regulation, definitely. We've got the Mexico decree with the biotech corn. What do you think would be the outcome of that particular discussion?
Well, that's something that I'm aware of, but have not done a lot of research on. I think Mexico is ultimately they're going to continue to buy cracked U.S. corn. I don't know that they've got viable sources otherwise. I think South American freight, in order to get that corn north, is going to be prohibitive.
Okay.
The policy will be what it will be, but I suspect we're going to continue to have a strong export market into Mexico.
Any other countries producing ethanol? You mentioned South America. They do it a bit different.
South America produces 7 to 8 billion gallons to the United States, 15 to 16 billion gallons on an annualized basis. Now, a majority of theirs, 98%, is sugarcane produced ethanol. They have some corn production plants that have come online, and that is growing, but a majority of it is sugarcane based. So it's a very seasonal crop.
Okay.
We'll see in March they'll start the sugarcane harvest, and at that point is when they really start pumping out the ethanol. But a lot of times, if Brazil is going to buy U.S. ethanol, we see it in December, January, and February.
Okay. So what's on the agenda for you guys 2023? You have your annual meeting coming up.
Yep, we'll have the annual meeting in March, but so for 2023, the things that are on the front burner are just trying to analyze and make sense of all the different regulatory changes and make sure that Big River Resources, as a company, is leaning into those changes and making the right decisions to ultimately have a viable long-term company.
Okay, sounds good. Anything else you want people to know about Big River Resources?
Yeah, I think most of your listeners probably understand that the company is getting towards 15 to 20 years old. It is still a local company at heart. There's a lot of consistency within the board and the management team, and there's still a strong local feel to the company. You're going to see things changing with the company down the road, and not in a major way, but in a way that, as we've discussed, is going to be, we think, critical to our product, and that's low carbon ethanol. So.
Okay. Well, appreciate you coming in on this snowy, winter storm warning weather.
Yes. What a day. What
You
a
be
day.
safe out there. Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Yeah, same to you, Vanessa, and Merry Christmas to everyone listening.
Okay. We'll see you again and talk to you again soon.
All right. Thank you.
That is David Zimmerman with us. He is the Big River Resources CEO and President on 1330 WRAM and FM 94.1. It is 8:47. Good morning.
Company has served local and nationwide clients with the highest
Yeah, that
quality.
clicked off on me, right?